Hi, I'm Jaime Pollitte, North American Program Director for Mountain Madness, and we're standing here in beautiful West Seattle, looking over the city skyline. Wanted to spend some time with you today talking about clothing that you might be taking out on your next mountain adventure. We have a bunch of clothing here provided by Helly Hansen and other companies, and we're going to go through each individual piece of garment to make sure that you are fully prepared on your next trip. So for many people who have been doing this for years, this process is very intuitive. Developing a system that's going to kind of accomplish what you need throughout the day, maybe early mornings and perhaps into the evening. So for folks who aren't used to this, there are four main concepts that you have to consider. One of them is that you're managing your body temperature. This is the goal of the base layer, that you're having close to your skin. 2 is minimizing sweating, so being able to regulate temperature where it keeps you from overheating. All right, and then 3, insulating yourself from whatever temperature it is out there. And then the last one is protecting yourself from the elements like wind, rain, and snow. Okay, these are basically the same processes for everyone, although it might look different on everybody as well. So one of the most individual layers in this layering system is your base layer, the one that's going to be directly on your skin. These come in a variety of different weights and also different fabrics. Okay, we have a couple of varieties here. One is just a synthetic shirt, 100% synthetic with no cotton in it. Then we have a merino wool over here, and then we have a couple of thicker layers that we'll get into. But first off, taking a look, Washington has 2 climbing seasons in the summertime. You have the early season where the weather can be a little bit more unpredictable, and then as you move further into the summer, the weather becomes a little bit more stable and you're looking at a little higher temps throughout the day and into the evening. So starting off and going backwards a little bit, late in the summer season, it can be really hot while you're hiking in or when you're starting to climb. So some people prefer to go with a synthetic shirt like this. Again, it has no cotton in it. It will wick moisture away from you, and it even has this wicking thing that's around the collar. Okay. This is probably your go-to on a late August, early September climb, when the temperatures are really kind of at their peak for the summer. Okay. Going back a couple of weeks, sometimes 3 or 4 weeks, you're looking at maybe a little bit more insulation in your base layer. And that would be like sometime when this kind of garment is ideal. Okay, this is made of merino wool. It's about the thickness of a light t-shirt, a very light t-shirt, but also has the ability to keep UV rays off of you, and has some insulation properties. Once you get into the early part of the season, then you start thinking about having a thicker base layer. Okay, one of the go-tos here would be something that's similar to this layer here. Okay, this is about the thickness of maybe a light sweatshirt. It also comes with the hood as well, and it is able to, pretty much be an insulation garment on its own. Right. Another similar one we have is a full zip version. Which is pretty much similar weight, kind of like I said, a light sweatshirt or a heavy long sleeve t-shirt. And these are kind of your go-to for early season to late season, okay? Which one you choose really depends on when you're gonna climb and how well you regulate your heat, because this is gonna be your primary thing to kind of keep moisture away from you and create that temperature control that you want in your garment. So this next layer is an optional layer on our equipment list, and it primarily is to provide wind protection. So a lot of times, people won't bring these. Some people really love them. They come in 2 different types of material. One, like we see here, is a lightweight nylon. And these things are meant to get really small. Like this thing should get to the point where I can almost make it and ball it up into a ball in my hand, okay? These basically are just there to provide protection against wind. They don't necessarily shed off the water very well, but they can typically handle some lightweight precipitation. Another one of these comes in like a soft shell. And this is a very lightweight soft shell material. Again, 2 different fabrics for the same goal. Okay, they're meant to be active, so you can be active, and they are breathable, and that's why they're not 100% waterproof breathable. Okay, so once again, these things should be small enough to fit into your hand and almost be able to close inside of your palm. Again, this is a very basically an individual garment that a lot of people like. It's not a mandatory piece of the equipment list, but it's definitely a handy one to have around when you want to just wear your base layer and some wind protection. So the next layer is probably the hardest one to figure out for some people, just because this is your mid-weight insulation layer. This is going to come in a variety of sizes as well, and thicknesses, and also a variety of materials. Okay, you have your down fabrics, which is made of goose down, which has, you know, benefits of being really light, but it also has the added downfall of when it gets wet, it becomes totally useless. What I have here are two examples of the similar layer that is made of synthetic material, okay? So these are meant to be ultralight, but also provide a maximum amount of insulation for the weight. So I have two here. One is the Patagonia Nano Puff, and the other one is the Montbell Ultralight Wrap, okay? Both of these are replacing that fleece layer. You can still get away with fleece. That's not, you know, uncommon for people to bring it. It just tends to be a lot heavier. If it does get wet, it tends to get really heavy, and also is very bulky in your bag. So even these layers that are insulation layers are meant to be able to smush down really small and be able to fit in your pack in, you know, in any small little area of it. Okay, they're also meant to come out really easily, so you know this is something that you can keep in the top of your pack and throw on, you know, at every brake stop. So the next layer is soft shells, and soft shells, like everything else that we've been covering, come in a variety of thicknesses. Okay, the reason that you might use a soft shell is that it's a lot more breathable than your gore-tex layer or your hard shell layer, which we'll talk about in a second. Basically, when you take a look at a couple varieties here, you have your super lightweight soft shell. This is going to repel water a little bit. It's not going to hold up to a total rainstorm, but if you have, you know, some minor precipitation, it's going to keep you covered throughout the day. Okay, you could also go to a heavier soft shell like this one, which essentially is serving the same purpose. It's meant to be a very active wear, and it's meant to breathe really easily, but this thicker one just provides a little extra insulation. And so when you think about which one you're gonna purchase, typically it's gonna go with the season, right? So in early season, you might bring in a heavier soft shell jacket, whereas it gets into the later summer, you're gonna start going towards the lightweight soft shell. So arguably one of the most important layers in this system is your hard shell layer. This is basically your ultimate protection from all the elements, whether it's hard, you know, wind, rain, or snow. This is ultimately the thing that's going to keep all the other layers dry, okay? These come in a variety of different sizes as well as far as thicknesses. We're right here on the right side here, you have your lightweight version. This thing feels like a piece of paper. It is designed to be 100% waterproof, but this is more, the application for this is more for the light and fast type of trip. Something that you don't foresee yourself hunkering down and sitting in the rain for very long, something where you might be moving more than you're stopping, because ultimately the lighter weight fabric that's used, eventually the water will penetrate through the garment. Okay, if you are looking at something more extensive, you want to go to a more, I guess, full-fledged rain shell or hard shell. These are basically designed to be like your bivy sack if things went wrong in the mountains. It's supposed to do the best it can to keep out all of the elements, and this ultimately, the choice in which one you take really comes down to how you're going to be using it, what the weather looks like when you're going into the mountains. If I ever had a question, I'd be pulling out the hard shell. If I knew I was on a short duration where I can get in and out quickly, I might be taking the lightweight one. So gloves are probably one of the more individual kind of pieces of this system. And as you can see here, I have a variety of them laid out here. And basically it's going from the thinnest to the thickest gloves. I wanted to point out a couple of things that, you know, nowadays when you're thinking about gloves, you know, you can spend a lot of money and go with the name brands, but sometimes you can find cheaper options like at the hardware store that might fulfill that option as well. So taking a look first at these lightweight gloves here. So looking at this, you have a very lightweight soft shell material, very tight fitting, still has leather palms in it, so you're able to do rope work and clip carabiners. But essentially, this is going to be one of your primary go-tos because, you know, for the most part, climbs in the North Cascades, it's not going to be extremely cold. But you're going to want a lot of dexterity when you're, you know, working with ropes and clipping carabiners. So this is a glove that you're going to spend a lot of time in, okay? Especially if you have really good circulation, your hands stay warm. You might never use something more than this, okay? Like I said, there are a lot of options out there. Even going to the hardware store and getting a pair of mechanic gloves. This is a suitable thing. It is all synthetic material. There's no cotton in here. It does provide some insulation, but it's also only about $15 for the glove. Then the next stage you look at are pretty similar to these, except they've just added insulation into it. As you can see, this one here has a very warm, fuzzy inside with a fleece lining. But again, really grippy leather, are durable palms for working through ropes. Also a pretty tight fit. You can see that this isn't going to be very cumbersome, or bulky on your hands. It's going to be a pretty nice tight fit on you. And then the same thing goes from this. This might be just one step up. This is also, treated leather, so this thing is going to last you for a long time. But essentially, this section here is your go-to for the North Cascades for most of the climbing season. Early in the season, you might want to consider a thicker pair of gloves like this one, which is a soft shell material on the outside, waterproof, breathable, but it also is filled with a Primaloft insulation, which is kind of like the jackets that we had talked about in the mid-weight insulation layer. So this right here is about all you would need for the North Cascades most of the year. Most of the summer. With the exception of Mount Rainier, you might want to add into this system a double mitt or a double glove with a shell outer. So a lot of times liner gloves are one of those things that people go to. That would be in this application here. Thing with liner gloves is they're easily ripped, and they don't tend to last as long as some of these options here. So the last layer we're going to talk about here, and as far as the upper body is the heavyweight insulation. Okay, depending on what time of year it is, like I was saying before, you typically have 2 climbing seasons in the summer. April, May, and June, and July, August, and September. And basically, obviously, there's subtleties in the weather patterns, but the season is definitely going to dictate the weight of the garment that you're going to bring as your heavy insulation layer. So these garments come in a couple different types of insulation. One is a synthetic insulation like this jacket here, and 2 would be a down garment like this. Okay, so there's added benefits and disadvantages to each of these different materials. Okay, so one of the things that you're thinking about when you're deciding which one to carry, one is weight. Okay, down tends to be a lot more warmth to weight. Okay. Basically, the ratio to warmth to weight is quite a bit more than with the synthetic insulation. Synthetic insulation, however, does have the added advantage of keeping you warm when it is wet. So if this garment gets completely soaked through, it's going to still hold a majority of its insulation properties. If this down garment gets wet, it will become pretty much like a nylon jacket with a bunch of useless insulation inside of it. Okay. The other thing to think about when choosing these things is the time of year that you're going out. Okay, so I'd say for the majority of the climbing season in the Cascades, from July, August, and September, you're maximizing probably at something about this thickness, a super lightweight down insulation. This will keep you warm enough, when you're standing around camp cooking food. If you have an emergency on the mountain where you're moving a little slower than you need to be because of one reason or another, this is about the maximum you're going to go. The same goes for this insulation layer in synthetic. Okay, a lot of people will say this is overkill for, the Cascades during the summer season, but, keep in mind, these aren't there just to be worn as you're moving. These are there for emergencies, when you're standing around camp, taking breaks on the summit day. So choosing the right thickness is very important. In the early season, you might go to something a little heavier. Okay, what I have here is a heavyweight synthetic parka. Okay, and this thing will keep you warm in temperatures that get into the negatives. So again, if you had an emergency on the mountain, On a cold summit day in the morning, it's going to be something of this thickness if you're going in the early season. These also have comparable down jackets that are in the same insulation, but choosing them really comes down to what season you're going to and the particular weather that you're going to encounter for the time your trip goes out. To focus on pants and the lower body for a little bit, basically we're looking at three pretty typical layers here. Obviously, before we get started on these individual ones, you could probably add a pair of quick drying nylon shorts to the mix. Oftentimes in the middle of summer, people like to hike in a pair of shorts and then change into their soft shell or their other layers once they get to base camp. That being said, I'd say the majority of guides that you probably will go out with will throw on a pair of pants and pretty much keep those on for the duration of the trip, given it to be 3 to 5 days or whatever. So to focus on this for a little bit, let's start off with the very basics. It's the same layering system that you're using at the top. It's a little bit simplified because it is just your legs and there's not as much complexity to the insulation. But basically, to start off in the Cascades, you're probably looking at a silk weight pair of base layer long underwear. This can be merino wool, it can be synthetic, or it can be silk. Okay, you want a really thin pair because most of these soft shells have a good insulation property. So we're looking at first your base layer. Again, it can be merino wool, silk, or synthetic. Then you're moving into your main soft shell pants. Okay, so right here I have two on top of each other. One is a very lightweight soft shell and one is a heavyweight soft shell. So you can see how the lightweight soft shell is pretty minimalistic. Okay, when you wear this, you can probably get away with this in pretty warm weather because they do breathe really well. And then once you move into the heavier soft shell, you're looking at, there's some added insulation inside here, and just the thickness and durability of it is a lot more. Okay, so again, going back to the seasons in the Cascades, early season in the Cascades, you're probably looking at taking one of these heavier soft shells, or later in the summer, you're probably looking at going with the lighter weight. Obviously, everything comes down to, what your particular temperatures are going to be for the trip you're going to be on. So taking a look at the weather beforehand might be the determining factor. Lastly, again, just like we were talking about the hard shells for the upper body, the hard shell for the lower body is just as important. Okay, this is ultimately the thing that's going to keep you dry in a downpour. That being said, these soft shell layers do repel a lot of water. So if you're looking at pretty dry weather in the mountains, sometimes you can get away with just the soft shell layer and the insulation layer, or sometimes just the soft shell layer. Okay, most people take this hard shell layer in as a backup just in case there is heavy rain, because that will saturate this garment. But this is, again, hard shell coming in. Any waterproof breathable material, it should be a reputable waterproof breathable material like gore-tex, and so some of the other companies have their own type of technology that accomplish the same thing. But that's the basic gist of the lower body. Other than that, it's really just trying to get these things to be able to fit on top of each other so that they can go on, like we've been talking about, in layers. So just to tie everything together, what we've done here is we've kind of put together the ideal layering system for a trip here in the North Cascades. Obviously, when you're looking at this system, on any particular trip, taking a look at the weather, sometimes you can kind of plus or minus some things in and out of this system. But if you show up with this is pretty much a complete package. Okay, a lot of, the other things that we talked about, those are optional items, and some people have preferences to bringing them. But this is kind of your basic kit for anything. Okay, like I said, depending on weather, some of them can be dropped, but mostly in the kind of lighter insulation. So starting off with a nice synthetic shirt, button down. These are perfect for the hike into base camp because you'll keep you nice and cool. It also is going to wick your sweat away from you, but ultimately you're not necessarily worried about that much going into base camp, other than just the particular weather you're seeing. You're not very high up on the mountain yet, so you're pretty safe wearing one of these and just having your warmer layers ready to go if you need to. Once you get to the upper part of the mountain, you're probably going to switch into one of your traditional base layers. This one is a merino wool lightweight base layer. And so this one, again, would be an ideal one for summers in the Cascades, particularly after July. You might want to go a little heavier in the early part of the season, but for the most part, this is about the weight you're looking for. So if you see this, it's got a hood on it. The thickness is about a light t-shirt, like a very light t-shirt, but this is enough to keep you dry and keep the sweat away from your body as you're moving on the mountain. The next layer here is the lightweight soft shell. Okay, so this is your active piece, and this piece is, once you start getting a little chilly when you first start moving in your base layer, this is the layer that you're going to add on while you're still being pretty active, while you're making your way up the mountain. It's also going to shed any light precipitation, block the wind pretty well, and kind of give you general protection from kind of the outside elements. Okay, so this is your active piece that would go over your base layer. The next one is your primary mid-insulation layer, which is here we have a Patagonia Nano Puff jacket, which is made out of synthetic material. It's very lightweight to the amount of warmth it gives. It packs really small, but also, like I said, provides a lot of insulation for how much it weighs. This is going to be kind of your go-to on top of all of these other layers, and you might end up climbing in this thing as your outer layer, okay? Unless it's raining or any other kind of precipitation is coming down, this could be your go-to as your outer layer. So as conditions get worse, say it starts snowing, it starts raining, you're then going to move to your hard shell jacket here. And this, like I was talking about before, is typically going to be like a 3-layer gore-tex or something equivalent. Like I said, you always want to make sure that you're working with reputable fabrics that are waterproof, breathable, okay? And then your last line of defense is your heavy insulation jacket. In the Cascades here in the summertime, you're not looking at super cold temperatures except when you're on the summit or sitting around camp. So this garment is perfect. It is a down garment, and basically it's going to keep you warm enough when you're on the summit during high winds. Pretty much as cold as it's going to get up in the mountains here. Okay, this is also a good one when you're sitting around camp, just eating and having dinner with the rest of the group. So the glove system we've narrowed down to 3, and like I said, primarily for the North Cascades, you don't necessarily need to go any thicker than something that is about this thickness, okay? But your ideal conditions are that it does have some soft shell on it to repel water. It does have grippy palms so that you're able to work ropes and clip carabiners and other things like that. But you can see here, these are 2 different gloves, but they're almost the same amount of insulation between the 2, because these are the ones you're going to be working with most of the time, and the thing you want to have is a backup in case one of them gets really wet. But either one, having 2 pairs of these is ideal for doing trips in the Cascades. Then of course there's the lightweight soft shell glove that is kind of the start. You put that on, and that thing is going to be there until your hands get cold enough to switch to the other gloves. Lastly, like we were talking about, lower layers are pretty simple. Basically, you're taking this Polypro base layer just in case it's cold. This would be one of those things that you might leave behind if you're looking at good temperatures in the mountains. But then moving to just a soft shell. And this soft shell layer should be comparable to the weather that you're going to experience. So if you're looking at really cold temperatures, you're going to go with a thick soft shell. If you're looking at warmer temperatures, you're going to go with a thin soft shell layer. And then last, just like everything, you're going to want to have a pair of hard shell pants. And this, again, is your primary protection from the elements. Ultimately, you don't have to experience this, but basically if you get caught in a rainstorm, you're going to have your ultimate protection is going to be from these hard shell layers, your pants and your jacket. So I hope that is helpful in helping you plan out your trip and doing some purchasing for your upcoming trip. Of course, any questions you have, you feel free to call the office, and we'll be happy to break these down for you and talk about any of the garments in particular. But yeah, hope this kind of sets you up to get into the store and buy the things you need. And ultimately, think about it. A lot of these things come with experience, and you'll develop your own system as you gain experience.